Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
The stories we tell and how we tell them makes a difference. So Sunday night, I was running from a liquor store and it was dark and I was in a huge hurry. And when I stepped off the curb, something completely unexpected happened. I stepped onto something like that I couldn't see. And I was afraid that I was going to fall into the street and Lord knows what's in the street out in front of the liquor store. Instead of falling into the street, I hurled myself up onto the grass. Now that story sounds pretty bad, right? What am I doing at the liquor store on a Sunday night? And why was I running from it? Did I rob it? Was I someone chasing me? I sound a little bit like I'm in a sketchy part of the neighborhood and I'm like a degenerate and maybe I've got an alcohol problem. Who knows what's happening, but it doesn't sound good. So let me tell you the exact same story in a couple of other ways and see what you think. Sunday night, I was coming home from a convenience store when I fell. I was running late and I was really excited because I had a call scheduled with my best friend to talk about a trip that we're going to take next winter when it's cold here in Michigan. We're going to go someplace warm together. And I was just really distracted and not paying full attention. That's a pretty different story, right? And here's the last version. Sunday night, I was walking to the convenience store near my house. And despite the fact that it's located right next to the high school, there's this short section that doesn't have a sidewalk and it doesn't have streetlights. So for this short section, I was forced to walk in the dark in the street. Okay, that's the version I would tell if I was going to the city planning board and trying to get them to put sidewalk in that last section around the high school, right? That's a completely different version than running from a liquor store at night. And the thing is all of those stories are factually true. And yet they sound completely different, right? Some of the stories are kind of fun and exciting, and some of them are super boring. And even just the difference between calling it a liquor store versus calling it a convenience store, that alone makes a huge difference. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, is the idea that how we tell our stories makes a difference. Because going back to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago about the Bad Mom soundtrack, when we tell ourselves the story that we're a good mom that sometimes makes mistakes because no one is perfect, we feel compassion. We feel compassion for ourselves. We feel compassion for other moms that make mistakes. We feel compassion for our kids when they make mistakes. But when we tell ourselves that we're a shitty mom who is probably screwing up their kids and failing on a daily basis, we feel like failures. That kind of harsh judgment makes us more judgmental of ourselves and of the people around us, because the stories we tell matter. Okay, the stories we tell ourselves, they change how we feel about ourselves. And when we're feeling like a shitty mom and beating ourselves up for yelling at our kids, we actually make ourselves more likely to yell at them, right? You think that you're going to motivate yourself to be more patient. But when you make yourself feel bad, then just because of the natural way that we are wired as humans, we are motivated to get away from things that make us feel bad. Do you remember the motivational triad? Avoid pain, seek pleasure, expend minimal effort. Okay, so we want to get away from things that feel painful. So when we inflict pain on ourselves by telling ourselves a painful story about what terrible parents we are, it actually makes us want to avoid parenting, or it makes us want to like yell at our kids for making us yell at them. Okay, you can't make yourself a more patient mom by telling yourself the story that you're not patient and that you're doing a bad job. Okay, that's just a downward cycle. Does that make sense? If we yell at them because we're irritated by their rude behavior, then feeling irritated makes us feel terrible. And so we blame them for making us feel irritated, which leads to more irritation. Can you see? Does that make sense? Like that becomes its own downward cycle because the stories we tell ourselves matter. And they matter to our kids too. If you tell yourself the story that if you buy into the societal story that girls are divas and expensive to raise and drama queens, you're going to notice every time your daughter makes a diva-ish request, okay? Because you're changing your focus by the story you tell. You're going to notice that diva-ish request and maybe not notice the 100 other things that she was chill about. Okay, if you buy into the story that teenagers are rude and self-centered, then your brain will naturally notice all the times that they're rude and self-centered. Then you go on Facebook and you'll complain to all your friends about how rude and self-centered your kids are. And then they will tell you stories about the times their kids were rude and self-centered. Okay, and then it perpetuates it. Okay, you'll just keep noticing every time that they forget to put their dishes in the dishwasher or leave the gas tank empty. And you won't notice all the times that they call you from the grocery store and ask if you need anything, or the time that they got the car washed without you even asking. And we can role model for our kids telling a better story. Then we can teach them to tell a better story about their own lives. Okay. A lot of teenagers that I talk to, they have the story that it's hard for kids who don't party to make friends. That the reason that they don't have friends in high school is because they don't party. That story isn't a good story because it doesn't really give you any place to go. Like if you tell the story that it's hard for kids that don't party to make friends, then you're going to only have two solutions: to either start partying or get used to being alone. And like both of those solutions are terrible. You know it's a bad story to tell because it doesn't solve your problem of wanting more friends. Okay? If you tell yourself the story that it is possible to have good friends in high school and not party, then you'll notice the people that are doing that. And I promise you, those kids are in your school. Okay, that's a better story because it leads you to a solution. Ooh, and here's another good kid example. When they tell the story there's nothing to eat, then they don't look for something to eat. When you teach them to tell a better story, then they notice that there's cereal and there's stuff to make sandwiches and there's freezer meals. I don't know what's in your freezer. But as I look around our kitchen, like there was almost always food in the house. And so when my kids would say there's nothing to eat, like that's not a story that serves them figuring out what to make for dinner. It's a silly example, but those are the kind of stories that we tell ourselves that stop ourselves from looking for a solution. And so you want to teach your kids the skill of telling a story that helps them stay focused on a solution to their problem, a story that helps them stay focused on getting more of what they want. And another really timely example of this is I'm learning Spanish. And when I tell the story that my Spanish sucks and that Spanish is hard and I don't understand why there's so many verb endings and why nouns have genders and why adjectives have genders, like that makes no sense to me, that green can be male or female. When I think all those thoughts, it makes me not want to practice. When I focus on people laughing when I try to practice my Spanish, that makes me not want to practice. That makes me tell the story that Spanish is too hard and I'll never learn. If you don't learn as a kid, it's hard to learn as an adult. Okay, that's a terrible, terrible story. But when I tell the story that I'm getting better every day and that I could even roughly communicate with the taxi drivers when we went to Cuba, then I feel really proud and excited, and it makes me want to practice more. And when people laugh at my terrible Spanish, like, I am not kidding you. In Cuba, I called my husband my wife. I made mistakes like that all the time. I could see on their face that they were trying to figure out what the heck I just said. Like, it just made me laugh, and it made me want to try again. And then that made them laugh, and then they would teach me how to say it better. And in that way, my Spanish did improve. So take every opportunity to tell yourself a true version of your stories that supports you. Okay, a version that makes you happier and motivated to do the things that you need to do to have the thing that you want. Whether it's Spanish proficiency or good friends or respectful kids or a clean house or whatever it is you want, tell yourself a story that supports you having it. And you can role model that skill for your kids. You can teach them to tell stories that will support them getting what they want. And in that way, you can help them be more successful. All right, everybody. Adios. Hasta luego. Thanks for listening to Parenting Successful Teens. If you enjoyed today's show, then I've got a treat for you. I have a free guide that teaches you how to get your teenagers to tell you about their day. No more one-word answers. And grabbing this guide is super easy. Just text the phrase, Get Teens Talking, as all one word, no spaces, to the number 44222. So that's the phrase, Get Teens Talking, without any spaces, to the number 44222. And then you'll be prompted to give the email address that you want the guide sent to, and then it shows up in your email box just like magic. You know what else is magic? Having teenagers that talk to you. Now, I can't promise that you're going to like everything they have to say, but I can promise better conversations. Grab the guide, and I'll talk to you next week.